I was thinking about how financial wellness is so underrepresented in the financial industry and in the caregiving community. Nothing that I know of that specifically helps family caregivers through the financial planning process, which is sad because there's so many of us, and with so much information, you would think that there would be some type of curriculum or some guidebook to help you. When there's only 3 books that exist about financial education for family caregivers, and all of them are dated either in the 90s or the 80s, except one that will be published next year, which isn't mine, it's my friend's. So I start every presentation with talking about my inspiration for these presentations. I was a caregiver to my grandmother for 3 years after she fell on the floor, and she is truly the inspiration of why I started my journey in helping family caregivers plan financially. For National Family Caregivers Month, I've been putting together a series of videos of people talking about the financial toll of caregiving. So if you have some time, I would love if you could follow along with those videos, because they're very raw and honest stories. Has anybody here checked them out?
No, but I know a lot of the people that are featured there.
Well, then I guess you got to check it out then, Ellen.
Yeah, I think I do. Abby Compton, Christine, Kitty.
So for a little icebreaker, I told you this is going to be interactive. So I thought this would be a simple icebreaker to start with. You can either use emojis or hand signals, whatever you prefer. So the first one is 1/3 of caregivers stated that they've had to dip into their savings to cover caregiving related cost. Is that true or false?
Actually,
I'm gonna say it's more.
I that's why I would say it's false, because it might be more, but I'm trying to, yeah.
That's what I'm thinking, Ellen.
That's
Let's see.
My head went there too. I'm halfway.
Okay, it's true.
Yeah, it still is a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. The next one is 10% of caregivers feel that their relationship with their employer is strained. What do you think about that one?
Way more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we saying it's true or false?
False.
False.
It's false. It's 40% based on the research study, which I would think probably is higher, but
Yeah.
we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Next one is the effects of caregiving can lead to long-term chronic health concerns, translating to increased healthcare costs for family caregivers.
2 thumbs up. and all of my toes on my right foot.
Yeah, this is definitely true. So here's the 5 tips to protect your financial health for family caregivers. The first one is setting clear financial goals. If you don't know where you're going, how do you know how to get there? Financial goals set directions. So you're choosing choices that are creating the life that you want. As you can see, every single tip, except one, will have a QR code. If you want to learn more about setting financial goals, you can scan the QR code and there's a blog attached. So as I said, we're going to use that pen and paper that you have out, and I'm going to help you write down a financial goal. I created some templates to help you through that process. So the first one is about saving, to build up savings or emergency funds. The second one is about paying off debt. The third one is setting aside something for a future goal. The fourth one is about prioritizing your financial health by reviewing your budget each month. doing meal prep. Maybe that includes eating out less or having financial conversations. I just wanted to give you some examples. And then the last one is about setting boundaries and how you would respond to those. Does that template help, or? Let me know when you have one written down. I'm not going to ask you 3 months from now whether you completed this financial goal, so don't worry.
I'm done.
Okay, would anybody like to share their goal?
I'll go first because I will tell you, just because I've been in this business so long, we have our the top 4. I'm well into that, and we have an emergency fund in a safe here in our home. Actually, we have some in our home, but then we have obviously our emergency. We have some in case we can't get to the bank because the world is insane. So we have that in our home, and then we have, savings and investments. But the one I did write down that I need, it's a constant battle, is the setting of the boundaries for me. Not only do I have my ongoing situation with my mom, but we've pretty much leveled out. I've just had to rehouse her into a new location at significantly more money. I am her financial power of attorney, and I'm the executor of her trust as well. We have trusts in place, both my husband and I, and then for her as well. But that last one, I just had to do it literally today. Literally set a boundary. Someone in our friend group said, "Can you guys be here February 15th?" And in my world, I can't plan between my mom having a stroke, my husband's, we have caregiving issues on that side. We are 2 people with no children and no support from my family at all on my mom's side. And he's an only child on his side. So we are 2 adults. He's working. I'm on pause, and we are in pretty much on get to the emergency room. We've had probably about 6 emergency room visits in the last year. So you can't, so my response when someone is asking me, especially something that's more than 10 days out, I'm like, dude, not a chance I can there's not a way in this world I can make a commitment to what you're asking for something in February. So please just understand that. This is where my husband and I are right now. I'm being a little more open about that because I just feel like you have to. I've kept a lot of this when I was in a corporate setting. I kept it a lot to myself. I just tried to manage it, which is probably why we all hate our employers at the time. But now I'm in business for myself, so it's hard. And from a business perspective, truthfully, when I do get opportunities, everyone wants, Danielle, you probably know, as a solopreneur, everyone wants you to do everything for free, and I'm not at that juncture. And to the point where I'm not bringing in a lot of money, but I'm also not going to keep giving time away because time is money. So and I'm older, so that last one is an ongoing struggle, but I did write down that I need to get better at managing that.
I'm so glad that one of your goals is prioritizing yourself and putting your needs first. We'll talk about that more in the presentation. Anybody else would like to share your financial goals? If not, that's okay. Okay. So as we're talking about financial boundaries, here we go. We don't want you to max out your limit to the point where you're in a position where you're in caregiver burnout or leading there. We want you to be in a comfortable position financially while you're caregiving. And having financial boundaries helps with that. I have a couple of acronyms throughout this presentation, but the first one is CLEAR to help you think about your financial boundaries. So the first one is clarity, as in understanding your financial situation. Limits is understanding what your limits are to give to others. Understanding for E, understanding what is essential and non-essential when you're spending. A is for alignment and aligning your goals and values with how you're spending. And R is for respect, respecting yourself. You deserve so much as a family caregiver, and you don't deserve to have those limits crossed. And so I hope that this acronym is helpful as people ask you for things to take away your time or ask you to do something free as a solo entrepreneur, or ask you for money, to borrow money or to give money. I hope that this acronym is something that can be ingrained in your head during those times. So when I'm working with clients, we do what I call mental dress rehearsals. And pretty much these are hypothetical situations. And we run them through together. And we go through if-then kind of statements. So here are some examples of what I may run through with clients. If a caregiving task impacts my ability to earn or save money, then I will do something. And this helps brainstorm ideas of how we can handle these financial boundaries. If a family member asks for financial help beyond my comfort zone, then I can blank. If I'm using my own funds to cover caregiving expenses, then I will blank. So I'm going to give you about 30 to 45 seconds to kind of write down, just pick one and write down what you would respond to one of these. Would anybody like to respond what they put? I hope this is helpful in just kind of mapping out your ideas before someone, probably someone's going to ask you tomorrow for something, knowing family. How would,
Well, I think, I think one thing, like with the first one, I would evaluate. So like if I've been caregiving for so long. When I have come across this issue, I evaluate, is there a period of time in which I could step away from earning or saving for a period of time? If not, if that's the case, then I have like a limit. I would have like a limit or set a boundary. Like, okay, I can take leave from work for X amount of time, but then we're going to have to find other plans or whatever. So I think it kind of depends. I also think it's perfectly acceptable to say, I can't do that. I can, let's look for other options. I think that all depends on the particular person. But in my case, I would evaluate if I do have any wiggle room or the ability to pause my saving or pause my earning for a period of time, to maybe get a more permanent solution. With the second one, I have learned that if it goes beyond my comfort zone, I say no. That may not work for everybody, but that's what I've done. And then with the using my own funds, I think first of all, I keep a record because Medicaid wants to know. And so there's some of that, but I cover what I'm comfortable covering. Yeah, that goes back to the comfort zone thing. So, but I think it's important to keep a record of those things.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned about keeping a record, because there's many caregivers that I've met that don't keep their loved ones and theirs finances separate.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's a big no-no. In order
Right.
to keep record of which expenses are yours and which ones are your loved ones, it's best not to have a joint account together, because
Right.
it gets more and more hard to track.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and in regards to that, I mean, we actually do. We have a tax person who does our business and our personal taxes, and he knows what our situation is with my mom specifically. And he said, when we're making, I mean, he's even saying we're private paying everything too. It's her money that I'm managing, but there's a lot on my gas, I'm driving back. He's telling us even to keep mileage because there are tax write-offs. So does everyone, I mean,
Yeah.
he's been our financial planner for a long time, so I'm sure he knows what's going on, but that wasn't like that all along, but we didn't have these issues when we first met him either. So there's that. So even the increased, and for her, he does her taxes as well. And she's now incontinent. And so I'm spending significant amounts of her money, managing her money to purchase incontinence products. And he's absolutely saying, keep track of that, because that's going to be beneficial, because she's obviously doesn't earn an income. So yeah, I have a feeling just even having this conversation, and then even just hearing, is it Jeanette?
Mm-hmm.
I have a feeling, like, as I'm thinking in my mind about all the other people that should be on this call, I have a feeling people didn't even know about this kind of stuff. Like, the keeping of the separation of it, or, having, like, I manage her trust. So we have I'm in her accounts, but it's her money, and and so we delineate it that way. But there's so many people that wouldn't even know that you can write certain things off, I would imagine. I mean, right? That's a really huge one. That's a huge little nugget that the world needs to know more about.
Well, and
Yeah,
this is a very practical workshop, but for a lot of people, this is not even on their radar, not only because they don't know this practical information, but they think it's their responsibility, and they're being a bad child if they're not spending their money, taking time off work, using their savings. They think that's what you're supposed to do. So there's a lot of that limiting, there's a lot of that mindset too that has to be overcome.
You just made a really good point on that, Jeanette, because I'm sitting here. I mean, I have, for number 2, what I'd like to, in full disclosure, how I'd like to answer that is, I have 2, I'm a Gen Xer, and I'm significantly younger than my 2 remaining boomer siblings, who are both retired and millionaires. And I'd like to answer that like they owe me money for all the years and all the I have cared for their mother while they're off traveling and spending and getting updates to their home. And I'm showering her, helping her use the restroom. And I'm we're the least financially stable. You know what I'm saying? Like on that one, it's like, man, they should pay us because, but I say that also to your point, this is a concept, to Jeanette's real point. I mean, we should be teaching this in high school, because these millennials who have boomer parents as well. My brother's had a stroke and has had multiple heart surgeries. He's got 3 millennial children. Like, it would be smart that we're teaching young people in like high school and college the basics of this, because if you're not a caregiver now, I don't care who you are, you will either know somebody that is, or you will be someday. Let's just keep it real. Even if it's for 6 weeks or something, whatever. It doesn't have to be a chronic illness. So these are really.
Yep. You both are mentioning such important points. I remember going through my caregiving experience, and I already started caregiving with not having very good, strong boundaries. And a lot of people think that boundaries are just something you're born with, or that you just happen to grow up learning. And for me, that wasn't a skill that I had in my toolbox. It took months of therapy to build and build tools to create and learn how to set boundaries appropriately. Because for me, just saying no was not the easiest.
So Janet, how do you like to track your expenses? Do you throw it in a spreadsheet? Do you?
Yeah, I'm a spreadsheet person. I know there's apps and all this kind of stuff, but I have, I use my, I have the banking apps. Her money is in a total separate bank. And then I also have a trust that's at my bank that doesn't, that I use for her care as well. But when we went through having to sell her condo and like get her, she was already on Medicaid, but in order for her to keep Medicaid, I had this house that was gonna, like, I had to sell it because I couldn't just keep it randomly. And because of the paperwork I did, I will also tell you that I did 10 years ago, we went to an elder care attorney. He set us up with trust documents. We had all that kind of stuff. And so then I went to the bank and was able to do that fairly easily. And that helped me be prepared for when Medicaid was like, or not Medicaid. I hate it when people are like, Medicaid takes your money. I'm like, no, Medicaid doesn't. Medicaid wants you to spend the money so that they're not going to pay anything. They're not, but anyway, I was able to take the proceeds from her house and use it in a way that was compliant with Medicaid's rules without feeling like she was losing the money from her house and, feeling like a scumbag because we were doing things appropriately. But we did it 10 years in advance. So we weren't taken by surprise about what we had to do when the house would be sold.
Are you, other than Jeanette and I, are you also, Tiny, a financial planner? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, so I'm a early retired physician turned financial planner.
Oh, okay.
And so my wife is a primary caregiver for her mom, but I, like you all, probably follow Danielle on X, and I have some clients that are caregiving, and so it's kind of.
The reason I asked that, I shudder when my dad was just on the front end of his dementia diagnosis. I knew we had wiggle room, and we had no trust, no nothing at that point. We had trust between each other, but we didn't have, formalized trust for financial planning at that time. But I was already in the industry, and I did get him to a financial planner, and there was means. They had means, I didn't know, I wasn't in their books at that point, but I knew how the lifestyle that we're all frugal they and me are frugal. But when we went to that financial planner, one of the first things they encouraged was to spend down. My parents owned their home at that point. They'd had no mortgage. And I'm like, we all kind of looked at each other like, why would we do that? That to me is an insult. And I'm not trying to, Jeanette, I don't know how that, everybody's situation is very different. I guess that's the point. We don't all, some people absolutely have to be on Medicaid, but we don't all have to be on Medicaid. And I think my parents actually are consider it a badge of honor that they never made six figures ever in their entire 62 years of marriage. But I'm still paying from my mom. I had to confer with her financial planner recently because there was a change of condition, and he still said, and her rent went up seismically, but he still assured me that we have about 4 years of, until we have to panic. And like I said, we're not talking about, they're not millionaires, but they really were frugal. And I just say all that to say that spend down, I know it's to leave money. They all say it's to leave money to the children. Well, my parent, I don't know. I'm just curious what you guys feel about that, because they worked hard. They raised 5 children. That money needs to go to them is what I'm saying to myself. And it is going to,
Well, I think that's the point. So spend down, in my understanding, and I'm not a financial planner, so please chime in, Danielle and Steiny. But in my understanding, it's like, if you want Medicaid to cover the stuff, then you have to spend down. Now you're spending down in a different way because you're spending the money to care for your parents, which is appropriate and acceptable. Where I think the problem comes in is when families are like, well, we don't want to spend down. We want to save that money and hand it off to we want to pass it on to our children. That's why we bought all these properties and we have all these things. We want to leave it to our children. And then the children are stuck, not, they're like, oh, we thought, not in a selfish way, not like that. We thought that was ours, but like, there was an expectation of this, there being something left. And it's like, well, the only way there's going to, like, you either spend down to get on Medicaid or you spend it to care for yourself. And if you live long enough, you'll spend it down and get to be on Medicaid. Like, that's my layman's understanding of it.
Yeah, but my concern with all that is, having started in skilled nursing, and that's years ago. I've been the last 20 some years of my career have been in the for-profit side of assisted living. You get what you pay for when you spend down. You know what I mean? And it's not in every case, but that spend down, not everyone can afford 8, 7, 8, 6, 5,000. Every place is different. We are making advancements in affordable housing because of these exact reasons. But that Medicaid thing, I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I don't want to. I just know too much about how some places are not where you would want to put your loved one. But that's not across the board, so don't go by me. But that anytime the government's got their hand in your money and they're making decisions on how to allocate that, that's where I struggle, because anyway.
Yeah, that's why it's so important to find a financial planner who will understand your situation, not just on a piece of paper or looking at your finances, but they're truly getting to know you and what your goals are. But also someone who understands the Medicaid requirements. I would say maybe less than 2% of advisors actually understand the Medicaid requirements and how that goes, and know how to work alongside an attorney to manage. Like Jeanette mentioned, she worked alongside her elder care attorney so that she was making the right moves to ensure that her mom could continue to receive Medicaid. And that's a process that many people don't take.
Yeah, Jeanette, that's genius. And you're literally probably one of the first people I've ever heard or explained it that way. The fact that you're still talking about, you sold her home and there were assets there, and again, for this conversation, it's not important for me to understand the nuances of that, but by hearing you say that, I thought, wow, this is somebody that's really done their homework, and you've managed it by finding somebody that you work with. Whatever the story is, you're a unicorn in my experience. And like I said,
I think that's why the work that Danielle is doing is so important, is to get this out there and having people think about their own financial plan in relation, like as we're caregiving, and potentially tapping into our retirement, spending all this stuff, what we're doing is setting our children up for a bad situation, which is why I think it's so important to have boundaries and to understand what's going on in your state, what is available, what isn't. My mom has been disabled since I was 8 years old and has been on Medicare and then eventually Medicaid. And so it was vital that she was able to keep that, because it would have, one of her treatments would have wiped out everything, right? And so she knew that ahead of time. So we're going to give her credit for knowing, let's get, because we don't want to break the rules. We're not trying to, swindle anybody. We wanted to
game
follow
the system.
Yeah, we're just trying to follow the rules. And there are rules that are set up. I know in my state, I know Medicaid works differently in every state. There are rules set up that's very clear. Like, if you want to do this, this is what you need to do. If you want to do that, this is what you need to do. And so we were able to find that. And like I said, it was her, she was like, we've got to make sure this happens, because down the road, this is going to be an issue eventually, sometime. We don't know when. And we made it about 10 years. But I dusted off that paperwork and I called the lawyer. I was like, is all this still good? He was like, yep. And I was like, all right.
Well, I want to be respectful of all your time. I still have 2 more steps to go. So we'll go right through them. So 3 steps. Creating a solution fund. So I also have a QR code if you'd like to check out more about creating a solution fund. And to convince other people to chime into the fund. My goal is with clients is to have friends and family, people who ask you for help, because there will be people who ask you for help. Think about these 3 B's. So I'm going to use this fund for breaks when I need respite care, when I need a vacation. I'm going to use it for when I'm bored, which is probably very rare, but in those times you may want to have a subscription for streaming. You may want to get a massage. You may want to have a plan for self-care. And the last B is backup plans. When things are up against the wall, I have a fund set aside, not just for emergencies, but for the care of my loved one. And I'm going to ask family members to contribute to this because of these things. So again, we're getting out the piece of paper and pencil. I'm not going to ask you who these 3 people are. Write down 3 people who can help you or have asked you for help. And then describe how they can help you. So for me, during my caregiving time, it was, I'm going to ask the librarian for their calendar of events, because it's easy to take my daughter there and it's self-care for me because I can relax while the librarians do their activity. Or it was, I want a chance to get out and go for a walk every day and maybe lie on the grass because that feels good. And I'm going to ask my husband to help me with that. Does everybody have their 3 people and how they can help? You're on mute, Jeanette.
I was trying not to talk anymore, but so the pool of people has expanded and lessened over the years, obviously. But I do have some friends of hers that I can say, I'm not going back up to the nursing home for a couple of days, but she's going to want XYZ. Can you go and take her XYZ? However, I've also, and usually they say yes, but sometimes they say no. and I'm able to say, okay, well, I guess she's not going to have XYZ until I get there in a couple days. It's okay. But, but I try to do things like that. Her, the team that works with her at the nursing home calls me, like I can call them for updates. If something happens and I can't show up as expected or something like that, I can call them and communicate with them, and they're very helpful with her on that. I also do pay for a sitter to go, which is part of something that I do for my own self-care, so that I know that somebody is there. And we have a deal where she goes on the days that I don't go, but the people don't know when we're coming. So we have a schedule, but they don't know it. But they now expect her to be there, so it's kind of fun. They're like, hey, and my mother-in-law is really good about listening without judgment. And my husband, he's a saint because he listens all the time.
My husband.
Well, and that's why I did 3 people instead of 1. So you're not just relying on one person. I found that some of the best helpers were the people that were around you that you don't even see. Like the neighbors, the mailman, the garbage man. Those people are around you all the time and can be some of the most helpful people. You just have to ask for help, which is sometimes the hardest thing to do. We talked about creating a spending plan, or a bad word called budget. So Jeanette talked a little bit about how she tracks her spending. Does anybody else have other ways that they track their spending?
This goes back to one of your, for us on our end, again, it's just my husband and I. My list is a person of one, but I will say there was a LinkedIn colleague who I've never met in person, but knows that I'm a caregiver. And she reached out to me randomly today and asked me how my mom was doing. And it meant the world just to have somebody like see you, just see you, and you're not even sure. But how we track our spending kind of ties into that an earlier slide you had where I said we kind of were doing all those. The eating out, like I have a garden now, which is part self-care and part sustainability. I did start that while I was still in my corporate position. I traveled 90% of the time, so I was gone from home a lot back in those days. And so the garden was like my respite for just mental wellness and decompression then, but it's now a lifeline for a variety of reasons. And I've grown it and it's larger. So we don't eat out as much, both financially and also from a health perspective. So tracking it, I mean, I'm the budget, like literally balance my books is on a pink Post-it note on this laptop right now. So yeah, I'm the one kind of managing the money, and we just don't tap in. We just act like we don't have the money in the secret places that like the Roths or the money market. We just act like that money doesn't exist, and we just kind of go with what's coming in, and we don't spend more than what's coming in. And we always, even if it's $50, I can tuck away to that money market. I'm doing it. We don't, so that's helpful.
Yeah, I want to make clear, I appreciate you sharing that, that I'm not going to judge you based off your expenses. If we go based off of the clear, like the abbreviation that I used earlier, A is, does this align with what your goals and values are? And I try to tie this all in together so that it wraps around together. But if eating, sometimes we have to eat out. But if we're just throwing money out the window and we're not tracking it, we don't know where it goes, nor do we understand whether it aligns with the goals and values that we have, then that's not going to be helpful for our care journey.
Well, we're kind of Dave Ramsey people, so I mean, although not really, because we do have one credit card that we pay off every month. So yeah, we have like, we pay cash. We do go out once in a while, but we kind of like, or we order in. We might do that. Like yeah. But you just said something. What the clear oh there was something about that anyway, I lost my train of thought. But no, I'm not ashamed that we can go. Like, by the way, I made an infrared sauna appointment for tomorrow, so I am going to go do that at
Ooh.
4:30. That's something, that is a total self-care. And so yeah, but we are really people, we're kind of pragmatic, partly because my husband and I, we don't have children, and it's us. And so we're trying to stay healthy. That's what it's another thing I try to work with people is, from a health perspective and longevity perspective, we need to be thinking about that. Like, sounds like Jeanette and her mom were long before you need it, because you try to avoid, not if you can, staying healthy as best as you can, and out of the hospitals as much as you can is an ideal game plan too, right?
Yeah, I love how you mentioned about how planning ahead is crucial, and being aware of what you're spending. I'm so glad that you're spending money on yourself, that makes you whole. And that's what the goal of a budget is.
Yeah. To answer track the spending, we used to do spreadsheets, and then we went to Monarch Money, which I absolutely love. It's a system, you attach all your accounts, it brings in all the information automatically. What we had, and now I do this for a living, right? But the problem we'd have is we'd have a credit card bill, and it was based on money that we spent 2 months ago, and we're like, why in the heck is a credit card bill so much? And because you don't really see the spending in real time because of the way that it pays. And so Monarch will show you in real time what you're spending that month. So it automates it. You can train it that this is this type of expense. I mean, if you weren't using a spreadsheet to track the expenses, for if you have to spend money for caregiving, you could do a category like, expenses for mom, and then it could track that, and you could tell how much you're spending. But Monarch is I really like it, for that aspect.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about Monarch, but I haven't used it personally myself. So thank you for sharing that it's worked well for you. So here are some ideas. Of these ideas, choose one that works best for you that you're actually going to implement. Because it doesn't matter if you do the apps or if you do the envelope system or the tracking journal. If you don't implement it, the tracking system is not going to work. For family caregivers with how busy they are, I think budgeting apps would work the best. But again, make sure you're actually using it. How long did it take you to set up Monarch?
It not long at all, honestly. And what it does is it takes your last 3 months of spending, and it says, hey, this is it builds you a budget. Like, everyone has a budget, even if you don't intentionally do it and it's unintentional. And so it will build one like, hey, this is what you spend in each of these categories, and you can completely revise it. I've got a family that's like, I don't want to track it like down to the penny. I just want to look at fixed, variable, and savings, and you can build it any way you want to. And so I had an accountant client that she tracked on a spreadsheet, and accountants are wicked with spreadsheets. And when I put her onto Monarch, she absolutely loved it. So
Yeah, so it seems like very limited time to set up and it's all automated for you, which
It's automated. It pulls all the data and it pulls the credit cards as it comes in. Um, for receipt organizer, there's an app called TurboScan. I think it's all of $4 one time. And TurboScan, you can use your camera on your phone to snap a picture of receipts, and then you can, let's say you have to go do go care for your parents, pick stuff up, multiple stores. You can snap a receipt for that day, and then save it there in the app, and then you can email it to yourself as a PDF to keep track of it. I used it for travel, but this would absolutely be a great use for it.
you said TurboScan?
TurboScan. Yeah, I have no financial ties to the app. It's just an awesome app I've used for years now.
I'm learning something new today every day. Thank you. So we talked about some of these things, but often this is kind of the extra level of the budget 2.0 is that when people are looking at a budget, they're often forgetting what they're paying for their care recipient or loved one. These are often not included. So just make sure that when you're totaling or tracking your expenses, that you're also considering these things as well. And then the last tip is an emergency fund. A lot of financial advisors use the emergency fund 1.0, but we're going to use the 2.0 today. And if you don't know anything about emergency funds, there's a QR code to a blog about emergency funds. Pretty much it's a fund you can go to for emergencies. So you get a flat tire, your loved one is in the hospital and you quickly need to get a bite to eat, or you need to get on a plane as quickly as possible to get to them. But when calculating the emergency fund, this is how it switches. A lot of people don't calculate the monthly caregiving expenses they pay for. So their personal expenses, but they're not covering their caregiving expenses in there. So they'll say, I pay for rent, I pay for food, I pay for insurance, but none of that includes the caregiving expenses that I listed here. And usually the guideline is to have about 3 to 6 months of worth of it savings in that account. However, I suggest for family caregivers to have closer to 6 months. Why I say that, it just gives you a little bit extra added protection in case something happens. If you have to quit your job unexpectedly, you have to take family leave, it just provides a little bit more support and more to be conservative. So I put together a real life example. So on these are not real life numbers, unfortunately, but give you a kind of rough estimate of what an emergency fund could look like. So the left-hand side is your monthly expenses. The right-hand side is the expenses you pay for a loved one. So if you were to add them together and then multiply that by 6, you'll have in roughly about 27,600 in that account. And the second mistake many people, the first mistake people make with their emergency funds is not having one. The second mistake is not having it as a cash or cash equivalent form. Many people like to invest their emergency fund in the stock market. And I don't suggest that, especially not for family caregivers and the unpredictability of family caregiving. So I suggest either a bank account, even better, a high yield savings account. Or you can use a CD, but you may want the flexibility of a high yield savings account rather than a CD. So as we ended the presentation, I would love it if you could write down maybe something you learned from this presentation or a tip you'll implement this week. I know I'm writing down that turbo scan to look into it. Does anybody else have something they would like to share? I know we're past the hour and I want to be respectful of your time, so if you have to leave, feel free to leave. And I hope you enjoyed it.